Welcome. Welcome to Fellowship at Home. Glad you're tuning in today for this study. We're starting a 3-week study on the topic of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I know it's been a week since Easter, but the resurrection of Jesus from the grave is so foundational for our faith. And it's critical for every believer to understand and to know how critical it is for their faith. And so we're going to be asking the question today, is the resurrection true? People have been asking that question for 2,000 years, all right? If it's not true, then our hope in Christ is in vain. In fact, Paul says we are to be the most pitied. And really all of Christianity is basically utterly destroyed if Jesus did not rise from the dead. And everything about Christianity, all the promises are in question if he did not rise from the dead. And then this is all a waste of time, and we could just go on and live our lives any way, old way that we want. And in fact, that's why a lot of people choose not to investigate the claim of the empty tomb, because they know that if it's true, it would have to change their life completely. It would have to. And so for today's lead-off study on this important topic, I want to share with you 3 pieces of evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, okay? And the first piece of evidence, by the way, these 3 pieces of evidence were foundational for me. When I was halfway through university, these 3 things were shared with me, and it caused me to look again at the resurrection of Jesus Christ for myself. All right. Now, for many years, I had basically believed what others had told me. But when I looked at the evidence for myself, these 3 things were very convincing. All right. And that's why I want to share them with you, so that you too can be convinced in the truthfulness of the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the grave. Okay. And the first piece of evidence is this, that Jesus truly did die, and he truly was buried. There's no academic dispute on this. In fact, if anyone argues this point, then they've never really looked at the evidence. And unfortunately, again, like I said, that's the case for a lot of people. They only go by what other people say. You know, if it's cool not to believe in Jesus, it's cool to be cynical and skeptical. But you know that when you truly look at the evidence, and that's why I commend you today, keep looking for the evidence. It's worth looking at, all right? And I'll be putting a list of resources at the end of this study, maybe on a Google Doc or something, just so you can access those same resources for yourself. Because there's some really neat books out there that help us to understand the truthfulness of the resurrection. And but here's the facts. Jesus, after he was being brutally beaten and flogged by battle-hardened and battle-seasoned Roman soldiers, he was executed on a Roman cross, and they declared him dead, even to the point of making sure by plunging a spear into his side, just for good measure, just to make sure. All right? Let me read from John chapter 19. Beginning with verse 31. Therefore, because it was the preparation day, that the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, it was a day of rest. The Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. Then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who was crucified with him. That's Jesus. But when they came to Jesus and saw, notice, that he was already dead. Okay, the Roman soldiers saw that he was already dead. Key point, okay? They did not break his legs, but one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And he who has seen has testified, and his testimony is true. And he knows that he is telling the truth, so that you may believe. All right? So just let me underline there, underscore the fact that these battle-hardened, battle-seasoned warriors saw that Jesus was dead on the cross. They knew what dead men looked like on the cross. I mean, this had been the style of Roman Crucifixion was the capital punishment of the day. They knew when they were dead. And for these battle-hardened, battle-seasoned warriors to make that mistake that, oh, maybe he was just alive, maybe he just fainted, or maybe he fell asleep, or maybe he just went unconscious, wouldn't have happened. Not with these guys. Okay, these guys were trained executioners. They knew what it was like when someone had died. And so to leave anyone alive after crucifixion was just not the Roman way. In fact, let me go back to Matthew chapter 27, and on the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, "Sir, we remember that while he was still alive, how the deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise.'" They remembered what Jesus had said. Okay, his own disciples had forgotten what Jesus had said, but the enemies of Jesus remembered. Okay, it's a little point to remember. "Therefore, command that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away and say to the people, 'He has risen from the dead.' So the last deception will be worse than the first." And Pilate said to them, "You have a guard. Go your way. Make it as secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. Jesus Christ truly was dead, and he truly was buried. All right? So that's the first piece of evidence. And why is that evidence? Because there are people who believe that, well, he swooned, or that, maybe he recovered in the tomb, or maybe he just slipped into some subconscious, unconscious state, and maybe he fell asleep or fainted. Who knows what they were thinking, what people think, but no, Jesus truly did die. And friends, he died for our sins so that you and I might be forgiven. All right? So that's piece of evidence number one. He really did die, and he really was buried. The second piece of evidence I would suggest to you is that the tomb truly was empty on that Sunday morning. Okay? The tomb was truly empty. Nearly 3/4 of scholars agree on this. Okay, they agree that the tomb was literally empty. Why the other three don't, or why the other quarter, the other 25%, the other quarter of all scholars, why they don't agree, I'm not sure on what basis, but the original sources point us to the fact that the tomb was empty. People saw the tomb empty. People went into the tomb and they saw the tomb was empty. All right? No one, and here's the thing, no one disputed. Now, let's not talk about the disciples, okay? We know that the disciples went into the tomb, but what about the enemies of Jesus? What did they think of the empty tomb? Well, the Roman soldiers admitted the tomb was empty. The religious leaders knew that the tomb was empty. All right, no one disputed the fact that the tomb truly was empty on the Sunday morning. Some of them, of course, we read, had to see for themselves. But even the soldiers who guarded the tomb, listen, Matthew 28. In the first part of Matthew 28 is Matthew's account of the resurrection. Okay, you can read that on your own. But jump down to verse 11. This is after that Sunday morning. "Now, while they were going, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all the things that had happened. When they had assembled with the elders and consulted together, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, saying, 'Tell them, his disciples came at night and stole him away while we slept.'" Okay, the soldiers knew the tomb was empty. The religious leaders knew the tomb was empty, and they're trying to create, well, false news, for lack of a better term, right? We hear that term a lot these days. They knew the tomb was empty. And they went on to say, "And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will appease him and make you secure." So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. And here's the point I would challenge you to see, all right? And understand, no one disputed the tomb was empty. No one, no one, not one enemy of Jesus disputed the fact that the tomb was empty. I mean, if you could present a dead body, then there's proof. I mean, present the dead body of Jesus, and there's proof that there's no truth to it. But the fact is, no body was ever found, and um, and you know, Jesus truly was alive because the tomb was empty. And here's the other thing too, and that I want you to see. Over 500 people saw Jesus after that Sunday morning. I know, 500 people. We're not talking one or two. We're talking over 500 people. The disciples saw him for sure in the upper room. Thomas saw him on that second visit to the upper room. 500 people saw him all at the same time. We're going to be looking at that in 1 Corinthians 15 next week. But 500 people saw Jesus alive at the same time. Now, eyewitness accounts are always preferred. I mean, rumor is one thing, hearsay is another, but eyewitness accounts, friends, that is one of the most convincing proofs that Jesus Christ is risen. There are convincing proofs because over 500 people saw him at the same time. Over 500 people cannot lie about what they see. And so just something for you to think about, that second piece of evidence. First, that Jesus truly did die and was buried. And secondly, the tomb was truly empty on the third day. The third piece of evidence is probably to me one of the most exciting parts, is because those who saw him, their lives were transformed because of him. Those who saw him, their lives were transformed. Now, I'm not talking just for a day or two. They were excited and, their lives were changed for a couple days. No, for the remainder of their lives were transformed. Let me give you a silly example. And I acknowledge it's a crazy example, but imagine with me an elaborate hoax. If I were to say something like, Dairy Queen ice cream is the cure for COVID-19, you would say, David, you're out of your mind. Deep inside, I know it's a hoax because I'm making the lie up because I want to see the stocks and shares of Dairy Queen go up through the roof during this time of shutdown, okay? How long would I be able to maintain that lie? When an investigation is done, people will question, and of course people will accuse me, and then people will persecute me, people will hate me. How long will I be able to hold on to that lie? Maybe if I was a lunatic, I could probably last longer than most, but if I was a lunatic, it would show in other areas of my life. Here's the thing. That is one of the foremost beliefs in my heart that I want to share with you this morning, okay? Even the most critical scholars of the Bible acknowledge that the disciples proclaimed the resurrection at their own peril, all right? They knew the truth. They knew that Jesus, they had seen him with their own eyes. They had handled him with their own hands. They knew him. They ate with him. They spoke with him. They saw him alive after he had risen from the grave. Now, if it was an elaborate hoax, how long could they hold on to that hoax? How long could they handle that lie? These disciples paid the ultimate price for what they saw, what they believed. There was no evidence of lunacy. There was no evidence of mental illness. There was no evidence of any other sign of a hoax. These men would give their lives for what they saw and experienced. There's no other explanation that makes sense of all the historical details. Every critical thinker, every scholar, every student of the scriptures who honestly examines the Bible, all right, acknowledges these three pieces of evidence. One, that Jesus really did die. He really was buried. The tomb was really empty, okay? On the third day, it was empty. And the third piece of evidence is that the lives of those who saw him were dramatically changed, transformed. The Apostle Peter, who would be one of the most notable change people, disciples, would go from this point, and just a few days later, he would stand before a great crowd of people, and he would preach about Jesus being raised from the dead by God. And he said, and we are witnesses. We have seen with our own eyes. Yes, people have always accused him of being drunk. People have accused them of making up these stories. But friends, they went to their graves with the knowledge that Jesus Christ was risen from the grave. Well, let me challenge you this morning. Maybe you are disagreeing with me today as you watch this video. I welcome your comments. I welcome your questions. But if you are disagreeing with me, let me ask you a question, because it's a question that you need to answer. All right, it's a problem that you need to solve. All right. The question is this: what is a better explanation of the facts? In the final analysis, the one thing that could destroy Christianity turns out to be the one thing that verifies everything important. Put very simply, Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. He is risen indeed. And next week, we're going to look at the implications for our lives, okay? I will try to post a document on here with all the Bible passages. It might be at the end of the video, but we'll get it on there just so you have an awareness of all the good sources that you can reach out to. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate. Reach out to me. Leave your comments below. And thanks again for watching. God bless. Keep looking up.